Stop trusting that bag of pre-washed salad sitting in your refrigerator right now. I know that sounds extreme, but by the end of this video, you're going to understand why doctors like me have started asking our older patients a question we never used to ask. Have you eaten any raw produce in the last 2 weeks? Because right now, as I'm recording this, there is an active outbreak spreading across multiple states, and it has already put more than 100 people in the hospital in Michigan alone, with case counts nationally climbing toward 7,000. This isn't a hypothetical. This is happening right now in real time, and almost nobody over the age of 60 knows the name of the organism responsible. It's called Cyclospora. It's a microscopic parasite, so small you could never see it on a leaf of lettuce or a sprig of cilantro, and it causes an illness that federal health officials describe using a word you don't hear very often in medicine: explosive. Explosive, watery diarrhea that can last for weeks, sometimes months, if it isn't caught and treated properly. And here's the statistic that should get your attention. According to data reported to the Centers for Disease Control, roughly 1 out of every 11 confirmed cases has required hospitalization. For a younger, healthier adult, that's frightening enough. But for those of us over 60, 70, 80 years old, the math changes dramatically, and I'll explain exactly why in a moment. Before we go any further, I want to tell you something important. I read every single comment on these videos, every one of them. So before we dive in, I want to know two things about you. First, how old are you? And second, I want you to think about the last time a stomach illness knocked you off your feet, maybe kept you from a grandchild's birthday, a trip you'd planned, a simple walk you look forward to every morning. Tell me about it in the comments. I mean that. These stories are what shape the videos I make, and I want to understand what you're living through. Now, here's what I promised you. Item number 1 on this list: the food responsible for the outbreak happening this very summer, the one hospitalizing hundreds of people in the Midwest as we speak, is something almost every senior in America eats multiple times a week without a second thought. It's not some exotic imported delicacy. It is one of the most ordinary foods in the American diet, and I'll tell you exactly what it is and how to protect yourself when we get there. But to understand why it matters so much, you need to understand the 6 foods that came before it, because Cyclospora has a pattern, and once you see the pattern, you'll never look at your produce drawer the same way again. Let's talk about why this matters so much more for those of us past 60. When you were 25, your immune system was like a well-staffed security team, constantly patrolling, catching invaders before they could do real damage. As we age, a process called immune senescence sets in, which simply means your immune system's response gets slower and less coordinated. Almost like that security team losing staff members one by one until the building isn't being watched as closely anymore. On top of that, the lining of your intestines, the barrier that's supposed to keep parasites and bacteria from causing chaos, naturally thins with age. And dehydration, which sounds minor when you're young, becomes genuinely dangerous after 70 because your kidneys don't concentrate urine as efficiently and your sense of thirst becomes less reliable. Put those 3 things together: a weaker immune response, a thinner gut barrier, and a body that dehydrates faster and recovers slower, and you can see why a stomach bug that might knock a 30-year-old out for 3 days can put a 78-year-old in the hospital on IV fluids for a week. Let's count down from 7 to 1, starting with the food that's caused the fewest outbreaks but still deserves your attention. Number 7 is snow peas and snap peas. Back in the mid-1990s, when Cyclospora first emerged as a recognized foodborne threat in the United States, snow peas imported from Guatemala were identified by federal investigators as one of the vehicles carrying the parasite into American kitchens. Here's the mechanism, and I want to explain it simply because the word parasite tends to make people picture something dramatic, like a worm. Cyclospora is nothing like that. Think of it less like a worm and more like a microscopic seed. It travels in human waste, and if the water used to irrigate a crop or the water used to wash it after harvest has been contaminated by that waste, the parasite clings to the surface of the vegetable, sometimes working its way into the tiny natural creases and folds. Snow peas and snap peas have exactly that kind of textured folded surface, which makes them harder to rinse clean than something flat and smooth. And for an aging digestive system already dealing with reduced stomach acid, which is your body's first line of chemical defense against ingested organisms, that's a meaningful vulnerability, because stomach acid production naturally declines with age, sometimes dropping by close to a third in people over 70, leaving fewer defenses to neutralize what you swallow before it ever reaches your intestines. My practical advice is simple. If you're buying snow peas or snap peas, rinse them under running water while gently rubbing each pod between your fingers, not just a quick dunk in a bowl. And pair that habit with something I'll mention again later because it applies to almost every item on this list. Cooking, even briefly, is one of the most reliable ways to destroy this parasite since it cannot survive sustained heat. Number 6 is fresh basil and green onions. Basil has been connected to multiple documented cyclosporiasis clusters over the years, including outbreaks investigated jointly by state health departments and the CDC involving people who had eaten basil at restaurants, often in dishes like pesto or garnishes that were never cooked. Green onions carry similar risk because of how they're harvested, often bunched together, roots still attached, sometimes handled by many hands before they ever reach your grocery store. Here's why this matters specifically for aging bodies. Basil and green onions are almost always eaten raw and in small quantities, sprinkled on a dish rather than washed thoroughly as a main ingredient, the way you might wash a head of lettuce. That casual handling is exactly the gap Cyclospora exploits. And because these are often the last thing added to a meal right before serving, they frequently skip the more rigorous washing that other produce receives. My recommendation is to treat fresh herbs the way you'd treat any leafy green destined for raw consumption. Separate every single leaf from the stem and rinse each one individually under running water, then pat dry with a clean towel. It takes an extra 90 seconds, and that 90 seconds is genuinely protective. Number 5 is blackberries. A review of documented outbreaks going back to the 1990s identified blackberries alongside their cousin raspberries as a repeat offender. Berries present a unique challenge that I want you to really understand because it explains why washing alone isn't always enough. A raspberry or a blackberry has a bumpy, porous surface full of tiny crevices between each individual drupelet, which is the technical name for those little round segments that make up the berry. Water can rinse the surface, but it often can't fully penetrate every crevice, which means a parasite lodged deep in those folds can survive even a thorough rinse. Think of trying to clean out a golf ball's dimples with just a splash of water versus a soft brush. The dimples simply don't release dirt the same way a flat surface does. For someone over 70 whose margin for error with dehydration is already thinner, I generally recommend that during any active Cyclospora outbreak in your region, and your local news will report this, you either cook berries into a compote, which involves heating them until soft, or you simply wait until the outbreak has been declared resolved before eating them raw again. That's not fear-mongering, that's just matching your risk tolerance to the actual current threat level. Number 4 is bagged salad mixes and mesclun blends, the kind that combine multiple types of lettuce, sometimes with shredded carrots, in one sealed bag. In 2018 alone, federal health officials recorded well over 2,000 cyclosporiasis cases across 33 states, and roughly a third of those illnesses trace back to 2 major multi-state outbreaks, one involving prepackaged vegetable trays and another involving bagged salad mixes sold at restaurants. What makes bagged salads particularly dangerous is something most people never think about. When contamination occurs during processing, it doesn't stay contained to one leaf. Picture a single contaminated leaf getting mixed into a massive industrial batch that gets distributed into thousands of bags across a dozen states. One point of contamination becomes thousands of servings. That's fundamentally different from buying a single head of lettuce from a local farm stand, where contamination, if it exists, is far more contained. For seniors specifically, I want to flag something important. Bagged salads carry a false sense of security because the label says washed or triple washed. That washing is designed to remove dirt and improve shelf life, not to guarantee the complete elimination of a microscopic parasite. My advice is to always give bagged salad an additional rinse yourself before eating it, even when the label claims it's ready to eat, and to be especially cautious about bagged salads during the peak outbreak months, which tend to be late spring through late summer. Before we dive deeper, I want to connect with our community. If you're new here, welcome to BioBytes YouTube channel, where we break down health science into actionable strategies. We're building an amazing global community of health-conscious individuals, and we'd love for you to join us. Hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you never miss our evidence-based content. And I'm genuinely curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments. We have viewers spanning 6 continents, and seeing our international community grow is incredibly inspiring. Your engagement keeps us motivated to research and create content that truly serves you. Now let's get into the top 3, because this is where the stakes get significantly higher. Number 3 is raspberries, and this one has historical significance because it's essentially where the whole story of Cyclospora as a recognized American public health threat begins. Back in 1996 and 1997, large multi-state outbreaks tied to raspberries imported from Guatemala put Cyclospora on the map for the first time as a nationally notifiable disease, meaning doctors are now legally required to report confirmed cases so health officials can track patterns. Since then, raspberries have continued to reappear in outbreak investigations, sometimes on their own, sometimes mixed into berry blends with blackberries and strawberries. The reason raspberries remain such a persistent problem comes down to fragility. Raspberries bruise if you look at them wrong, which means they can't be scrubbed or handled roughly the way you might wash a cucumber or an apple. Growers and consumers alike tend to give them the gentlest possible rinse, and that gentleness, while good for the fruit's texture, is exactly what allows a resilient parasite to survive. For an aging body, I want you to think about this in terms of dosage and exposure. Cyclospora needs a certain number of organisms present, sometimes referred to as an infectious dose, before it can establish itself in your intestines. Younger, healthier immune systems can sometimes fight off a smaller exposure without you ever noticing a single symptom, but because immune senescence reduces that margin, seniors are statistically more likely to become symptomatic from an exposure that a younger person might shrug off entirely. My honest recommendation, especially if you're over 70 or managing a chronic condition like diabetes or heart disease that already stresses your immune system, is to buy raspberries only in season from sources you trust, wash them extremely gently under a light running stream, and avoid raspberries entirely from any region currently under a public health advisory. Number two is cilantro, and this is a food that has appeared in outbreak investigations so consistently over the decades that some epidemiologists half jokingly call it a usual suspect in Cyclospora cases. Cilantro has been directly linked to documented clusters across multiple states, frequently tied to imported bunches used in restaurant salsas, garnishes, and bean or condiment based dishes never destined for the stovetop. Here's the mechanism that makes cilantro especially risky, and it's a detail most people never consider. Cilantro is harvested with its roots still partially attached to soil, then bundled tightly, stem to stem, for transport. That tight bundling creates the perfect environment for contamination to spread from one stem to dozens of others if even a small amount of tainted irrigation water made contact during growing or processing. And because cilantro is almost always used as a raw garnish, sprinkled on tacos, mixed into salsa, stirred into guacamole at the very last moment, it typically receives the least thorough washing of any produce in your kitchen. I want to give you a specific practical technique here that food safety experts recommend and that I use in my own kitchen. When washing cilantro, or basil for that matter, don't just run the whole bunch under the tap. Separate every leaf from the stem individually, submerge the leaves in a bowl of clean, cool water, swish them gently, then lift them out into a colander rather than pouring the water and leaves out together, which just redeposits whatever settled at the bottom back onto your greens. For added protection, pair this with a quick soak in a mixture of water and a small amount of vinegar, roughly 1 part vinegar to 3 parts water, which research on produce washing suggests improves surface cleaning compared to water alone. Though I want to be honest with you that even this doesn't guarantee complete elimination of a parasite this resilient. And now, number one, the food responsible for the outbreak making headlines this very summer, the one that has already produced more than 4,000 cases and over 100 hospitalizations in Michigan alone, with additional major clusters in Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia. It's lettuce, specifically shredded iceberg lettuce, the kind used in fast food restaurants and packaged salad kits across the country. As of this recording, health investigators have specifically flagged shredded lettuce supplied to certain restaurant chains as a likely link in this outbreak, though the full investigation is still ongoing. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Lettuce, not some rare imported delicacy, not an exotic mushroom, not raw fish. Lettuce, something the vast majority of us eat several times a week, often assuming it's the safe, diet-friendly choice on a menu. That assumption is exactly why lettuce claims the top spot on this list. It's the food we let our guard down around the most. The physical reason lettuce is so vulnerable comes down to surface area and structure. A head of lettuce has layer upon layer of leaves, each one providing places for contaminated water to settle. And once lettuce is shredded, whether at a processing facility or in your own kitchen, that shredding exposes even more surface area while simultaneously making it nearly impossible to inspect each individual piece the way you might examine a whole leaf. Think of a whole head of lettuce like a closed book, and shredded lettuce like that same book after someone's run it through through a paper shredder. You simply cannot check every single scrap the way you could check whole pages. For those of us over 60, 70, 80, this is the single most important takeaway from this entire video. During any period when public health officials are actively tracking a Cyclospora outbreak in your region, and this information is typically covered by local news and posted on your state health department's website, I strongly encourage temporarily avoiding raw, shredded lettuce from restaurants and prepackaged salad kits entirely, and switching to whole heads of lettuce that you wash and tear apart yourself at home, leaf by leaf, under running water. It's a small inconvenience that meaningfully reduces your risk during a period when your risk is genuinely elevated. Now, a few universal protective principles that apply across every single item on this list, because I don't want you walking away from this video afraid of your produce aisle. I want you walking away from it empowered. First, alcohol-based hand sanitizer does not kill Cyclospora, a detail that surprises most people. Plain soap and water used for a full 20 to 30 seconds is dramatically more effective at physically removing the parasite from your hands. So wash your hands thoroughly before and after handling any raw produce. Second, cooking remains your single most reliable defense. Cyclospora simply cannot survive sustained heat, so whenever a recipe allows it, lightly cooking or blanching produce that's traditionally eaten raw offers meaningful protection without sacrificing much in the way of flavor or nutrition. Third, if you do develop symptoms, and I want you to know exactly what to watch for: persistent watery diarrhea that doesn't resolve within a day or two, unusual fatigue, loss of appetite, cramping, or unexplained weight loss, please see a doctor and specifically ask for a stool test for Cyclospora. This is important because standard stool tests don't always screen for it automatically. You often have to request it by name. The good news is that it's treatable with a combination antibiotic, and most people recover fully with proper treatment, but untreated cases can drag on for weeks or months. And for an older body already managing other health conditions, that prolonged dehydration and nutrient loss can become genuinely dangerous. Full references for everything discussed in this video, including the CDC and FDA outbreak data, are linked in the description below if you'd like to look at the primary sources yourself. I want to close with something that has nothing to do with parasites or produce washing techniques. It has to do with what all of this is really about, which is your independence, the freedom to enjoy a salad with your grandchildren without worry, the freedom to travel, to host a dinner, to feel steady on your feet instead of sidelined in a hospital bed, recovering from something that could have been prevented with a little extra knowledge and a few extra seconds at the sink. So many of the people I talk to feel like getting older means gradually surrendering control over their own health, one small loss at a time. I don't believe that has to be true, and I especially don't believe it's true here. This is one of those rare places in medicine where a small, specific, learnable habit, washing your greens the right way, knowing which foods carry more historical risk, knowing when to switch to cooked produce during an active outbreak, can genuinely protect your quality of life. It is never too late to build a new habit. It is never too late to take back a little more control. Your best years are not behind you. They're the ones you protect starting today. If this video gave you something useful, something you're going to actually use the next time you're standing in your kitchen with a head of lettuce in your hands, please hit subscribe and share it with someone you love who might need to hear it too. And before you go, I want to know, which of these 7 foods surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one.